If meaning depends on language, how can silence contain meaning at all? Modern thought assumes a simple relationship between meaning and expression. We tend to believe that something has meaning only once it is spoken, written, or explained. What cannot be articulated is often treated as vague, incomplete, or intellectually suspect. Silence, in this framework, appears as a lack, an absence of information, a failure to communicate, or an empty space waiting to be filled. Yet this assumption raises a paradox. If language creates meaning, then where does language itself come from? And if explanation produces understanding, what enables explanation to begin in the first place? From a philosophical perspective, this suggests that meaning may not originate in speech, but rather precede it. Silence, then, may not be the opposite of meaning, but the condition that allows meaning to emerge at all. In Ibn Arabi's framework, silence is not a void. It is the ontological ground of meaning, the state in which meaning exists before it is divided into words, concepts, and interpretations. This discussion will move through three levels. First, a modern psychological problem related to noise and overcognition. Second, Ibn Arabi's metaphysical account of silence. And finally, how this framework clarifies meaning in contemporary cognitive and psychological terms. The contemporary human mind operates under conditions of near-constant stimulation. Information streams continuously through screens, notifications, conversations, and internal mental commentary. Even in moments of physical quiet, the mind often continues, narrating, evaluating, and predicting. In psychological terms, this condition is associated with cognitive overload and attentional fragmentation. The brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-referential thought and internal narration, remains chronically active. Instead of cycling between engagement and rest, cognition becomes continuous. The result is not greater understanding, but meaning fatigue. People report feeling that life lacks meaning, not because events are empty, but because nothing is allowed to settle long enough to be integrated. Thought continues, but understanding does not complete. It is important to clarify a key distinction here. Silence does not mean disengagement from life, nor does it imply emotional withdrawal. Silence, as discussed in this framework, is a cognitive capacity. It is the ability to suspend immediate interpretation so that meaning can consolidate. In other words, meaning collapses not because reality is meaningless, but because cognition never pauses long enough to recognize coherence. This leads to a crucial question: what if meaning requires stillness before interpretation? Ibn Arabi is often introduced as a mystical poet, but this description obscures his primary contribution. He was, above all, a systematic metaphysician, concerned with the structure of reality and the conditions under which meaning appears. At the center of his philosophy is a simple but radical assumption: reality precedes description. Meaning exists before it is conceptualized, named, or explained. Language does not create meaning. It reveals selected aspects of an already existent reality. A common misunderstanding is to assume that silence, in this view, is anti-intellectual. In fact, the opposite is true. Silence is pre-intellectual. It is the condition from which intellect becomes possible in Ibn Arabi's broader metaphysical system. Being wujud is unified. Differentiation arises through forms, names, and conceptual distinctions. Silence corresponds to the undifferentiated state before naming, where intelligibility exists without fragmentation. Silence, then, is not emptiness. It is the substrate of intelligibility itself. To understand this claim, silence must be defined precisely. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of conceptual partitioning. According to Ibn Arabi, meaning is not produced by language. Language functions as a selective lens, revealing fragments of a reality that is already present. Before language divides reality into categories, silence holds it as a unified field. A useful analogy is drawn from physics. White light contains the entire visible spectrum. When passed through a prism, it separates into colors. The colors are not created by the prism. They are disclosed by it. In this analogy, silence is white light. Meanings are the colors. Language acts as the prism. Cognitive science offers a parallel. Before sensory data is categorized, labeled, or interpreted, it exists as preconceptual perception. Neuroscience shows that categorization occurs after initial perception, not simultaneously with it. The insight here is straightforward. Silence holds all meaning because it has not yet excluded anything. Naming serves an essential function. It makes reality usable. Concepts allow communication, planning, and coordination. However, naming also divides. In Ibn Arabi's view, each name reveals one aspect of reality while concealing others. This is not a flaw, but a structural necessity. No concept can capture totality. Psychology describes this limitation through attention bias and conceptual fixation. Once attention locks onto a category, alternative interpretations recede. The more rigid the concept, the narrower the experienced meaning. This explains a paradox of certainty. As certainty increases, total meaning decreases. Precision improves, but wholeness diminishes. It is crucial to clarify that silence is not opposed to language. Silence contains all possible languages. Language is a selective unfolding of what silence already holds. Meaning narrows as certainty. Increases not because certainty is false, but because it is partial. Ibn Arabi distinguishes between discursive knowledge and direct knowing. This distinction is often misunderstood. Direct knowing is not emotional intuition, nor is it irrational insight. It is recognition without mediation. Discursive knowledge moves, step by step, through concepts. Direct knowing grasps patterns as a whole. Cognitive science recognizes a similar distinction. Analytical reasoning processes information sequentially, while pattern recognition integrates information holistically. These functions are often associated with different neural networks, including integrative right hemisphere processing. Silence is required for direct knowing, because continuous verbalization interrupts integration. When cognition narrates constantly, it fragments perception into parts faster than coherence can emerge. Silence allows reality to be recognized before it is interpreted. Interpretation follows recognition, not the other way around. A dominant modern assumption is that meaning must be explained to exist. If something cannot be articulated, it is treated as unclear or incomplete. Ibn Arabi reverses this order. Meaning is a mode of presence, not a product of description. Explanation is secondary. Presence is primary. Neuroscience supports this distinction. People often experience felt coherence, a sense that something makes sense before they can explain why. Verbal articulation comes later. If at all, silence holds meaning because meaning is already present before speech. Speech makes meaning explicit, but does not generate it. A reasonable objection arises here. If silence holds meaning, why speak at all? Ibn Arabi's answer is precise. Speech unfolds what silence contains. Speech does not create meaning. It expresses selected dimensions of it. Silence is not passive, and it is not withdrawal from reality. It is the stable ground from which expression arises. The logical structure is clear ground, manifestation, interpretation. Silence is the ground. Speech is manifestation. Interpretation follows. Silence remains stable. Meanings are dynamic expressions of it. These ideas are not spiritual techniques. They describe cognitive hygiene. Reducing internal narration, even briefly, allows perception to stabilize before interpretation. Creating cognitive pauses improves emotional regulation and reduces reactivity. Neuroscientific studies show that regulating default mode network activity improves attentional control and meaning integration. Silence, in this sense, is functional, not mystical. It is important to set boundaries. Silence is not escapism. It does not detach you from reality. It clarifies engagement by reducing interpretive noise. Meaning does not disappear in silence. Meaning becomes inaccessible only through excessive noise. Ibn Arabi's contribution is not a call to withdraw from language or thought. It is a clarification of their proper order. Silence is the condition that holds all intelligibility. The problem is not that life lacks meaning. The problem is that meaning is approached too loudly. Silence is not the end of understanding. It is the space in which understanding becomes possible.